Hello and welcome to Tech Tent, your weekly guide to all the hottest news and trends in the technology sector. I'm Rory Catlin-Jones, and this week the TikTok saga hots up. Is the Chinese video service that's huge with teens really getting together with Oracle, which is big with, well, enterprise software enthusiasts? A big week for the games industry. Is Facebook's Oculus finally making VR hot? Or should we be more excited about Sony's cloud gaming offer? And an earthquake in the computer chip industry. Will Nvidia's takeover of ARM destroy the business model of what's been called the Switzerland of chip design? Joining me to chew over all of these stories and more is BBC technology reporter Jane Wakefield. Hi, Jane.
Hello, Rory.
So what have you been up to this week?
So I've been looking into the case of yet another disgruntled ex-Facebook employee, and we'll hear more about that later.
And we'll get you chiming in on everything else. Here's a taste of what's coming up.
I think it's an absolute disaster for Cambridge, UK and Europe.
Now, I've really been enjoying using mine during this lockdown, and I'm looking forward to getting these in more of your hands in just a few weeks.
Do you know what? I've never been convinced that VR and gaming are the perfect pair.
All of that coming up. Now, it's been quite a saga ever since Donald Trump said in early August that TikTok would be banned from the US unless its Chinese owner ByteDance sold it. The race has been on to snap up the incredibly popular video platform. First, it seemed Microsoft, which had got together with the retailer Walmart, was in the lead. But this week, they were shunned. And instead, it appeared that ByteDance had got together with, wait for it, Oracle, a huge enterprise software business with no track record of dealing direct with consumers, let alone teenagers. But the whole deal continues to be a trade flashpoint between the US and China. Our Asia business correspondent Karishma Vaswani has been monitoring events closely and joins us from Singapore. Hi, Karishma. First of all, this isn't actually a sale to Oracle, is it? It's something rather different.
Yeah, Rory, I mean, from what we understand, it is quite different. It's what has been called a tech partnership. And, you know, the details of this are still unclear, but what we think might happen is that Oracle would end up providing the sort of licensing or the cloud data services in the United States, and that would allow TikTok to continue operating there. And it would also give Oracle customers, which it needs because it is competing and losing ground to the big players in cloud computing in the US. So it's a win-win for both, and in the end, ByteDance doesn't get an American owner, but it is to all intents and purposes paying a fee to an American company, which might satisfy President Trump.
And is China happy? Because China was making noises that, you know, it was going to have a very close look at this and stop it happening if it involved, getting rid of Chinese technology and putting it in American hands.
Yeah, about 2 weeks ago, the Chinese government came out with new rules on what kinds of technologies can be exported and what can't be exported from China. The timing quite coincidental, certainly. And it seems to suggest that algorithms, the kind that is the secret sauce of ByteDance and TikTok, what makes it so popular amongst young people in particular, that would not be allowed to be exported or to be sold outside of China. So for a while, everyone was thinking, well, hold on, if ByteDance doesn't sell this algorithm, then who really wants it? But that's precisely what the Chinese want. They want to keep control of the algorithm. And in this technical partnership, this tech partnership that we're hearing about, it does not look like ByteDance will have to give that up. And in that case, the Chinese will be all right with the situation.
And Jane Wakefield, obviously, this has been quite a saga, and it's a bit of a dilemma, isn't it, for Donald Trump and his administration?
Yeah, well, it's a very difficult decision, isn't it, for Trump, who has made this extraordinary intervention and forced a foreign company to sort of completely rethink its business model. And of course, he himself is being pulled in a whole lot of directions, with some Republicans feeling the deal with Oracle is too much of a compromise, others who want a full-on ban. And then, of course, he's got his voters, many of whom use and love TikTok and would not be very happy about the idea that they could no longer use it.
So, Karishma, let's look forward. and ask about the really important people, the TikTokers. Are they going to be allowed to go on TikToking as normal? Will they, frankly, not notice what's happened and just carry on?
You know, a lot of people that I talk to who use TikTok, Rory, they say to me they don't care whether it's an American owner or a Chinese owner. For them, they just want to be able to use the platform. And I think that's going to be key going forward with regards to whatever comes out of this whole situation. For TikTok users in the United States, they want to be able to feel like they can be creative, produce this kind of content, and they want this whole mess to go away. So whether or not Oracle has a tech partnership with them or ByteDance remains Chinese, I don't think it makes a difference to them.
Thanks, Karishma. A fast-moving story that by the time you hear this, it could have changed once more. Now, let's have a look at a couple of the week's other big technology stories with Jane Wakefield. Apple's September event is usually when it launches new iPhones, but will you forgive me, Jane, if I say this year's version was one big yawn?
Well, I know that you found it a bit dull, Rory, because there were no shiny new iPhones on display. But it is interesting that Apple is making a play into the health arena, and it unveiled 2 new ranges of smartwatches, one with a blood oxygen sensor that would help manage conditions affecting the heart and lungs. But perhaps more interestingly was its new personalised workout subscription service, which offers fitness routines which you can combine with data from Apple Watches. And of course, we've seen a huge rise in the online fitness business since the pandemic and people have been in lockdown. And actually, with a subscription of around $12 a month, I can imagine that this would be quite attractive to people who perhaps aren't that keen on getting back to the gym. You're looking at me very sceptically there,
I am
Rory.
really sceptical. But one victim of that was the trendy bike exercise firm Peloton. Its shares plunged on this news, although they recovered a bit since. Another story. Another Facebook employee has resigned with some serious criticism of how the social media firm handles political manipulation of its service.
Yes, so this was a data scientist who left the company and then sent a 6,000-word internal memo outlining just what a big problem political interference is on the platform. And she said that she felt she had blood on her hands because she had failed to deal with the scale of the problem. She writes, "I personally had to make decisions that affected national presidents without oversight and take action against so many prominent politicians globally that I lost count." And she outlines some of the issues that were in countries around the world, Honduras, Bolivia, Ecuador, Brazil, India, mainly around the use of bots that were trying to manipulate results of elections. Facebook has said in response that it has built specialised teams working on the problem and had removed more than 100 networks for inauthentic behaviour. But as we creep closer to the US election, I think we're going to hear a lot more on how it deals with political stuff on its platform.
Yeah, Facebook, lots of announcements this week about all sorts of different things, including one we'll hear later, but continually distracted by criticism, both internal and external. And finally, Microsoft has retrieved a data centre from under the sea. Says it's learned some valuable lessons. What's that about?
So 2 years ago, it sank a data centre off the remote coast of Scotland, and it's now retrieved it. And at that point, I'm going to hand over to our underwater data centre specialist, who is, in fact, you, Rory.
Yeah,
you can tell me about it.
I was there 2 years ago in Orkney, which is an island off the north coast of Scotland, beautiful place, where they sank this data centre. This is a big experiment to try and work out whether you can make data centres more efficient. I mean, it sounds eccentric putting it underwater, but their justification was it's ready cooling. And they did come up with some very interesting results. It's obviously a small data centre in a sort of shipping container. But when they pulled it up, they found that just 7 or 8 servers had failed out of over 800, a pretty low failure rate. And they said 1/8 the failure rate of a conventional on-land data center. And they said they think that's because A, they pumped it full of nitrogen rather than oxygen, and that was a better environment for some reason. And B, and this I thought was weird, because it was unmanned, there was nobody there, obviously, roaming this little data center. People weren't knocking into things, as if in conventional data centers, people crash around and break things. Anyway, they're hoping to learn lessons from this, possibly launch more undersea data centers, but also learn how to keep their conventional ones more energy efficient. So, interesting story. You're listening to Tech Tent from the BBC World Service with Rory Cellan-Jones. In a moment, gaming in the cloud or playing in virtual reality? What is the next big trend? Now, it's the tech company you've probably never heard of, but the chips it designs are almost certainly in your mobile phone and lots of other devices. Arm Holdings, based in Cambridge in the UK, is a big noise in the chip world, and since 2016 it's been owned by Japan's SoftBank. But this week, the very biggest noise in chips, America's Nvidia, agreed to buy it for $40 billion. That set off a storm of criticism, not least from Hermann Hauser, one of Arm's co-founders 30 years ago.
I think it's an absolute disaster for Cambridge, UK and Europe. One is if the headquarters move to the United States, as they inevitably will when ARM becomes a division of NVIDIA, this will lead to job losses in Cambridge, Manchester, Belfast. Secondly, NVIDIA will destroy ARM's business model, which is being the Switzerland of the semiconductor industry, of dealing with over 500 licensees, most of which are competitors of NVIDIA. The reason why ARM has a 95% market share of mobile phones in the world is because there's a lot of competition between these 500. If this will now be done by a single company, there's a monopolies problem. The third reason, however, I think is by far the most important and most concerning. It's one of economic sovereignty for the UK. If ARM becomes a US subsidiary, a US company, if hundreds of UK companies that incorporate ARMs in their products want to sell it and export it to anywhere in the world, including China, which is a major market, this decision on whether they're allowed to export it will be made in the White House and not in Downing Street.
Hermann Hauser. But NVIDIA's hard-charging chief executive, Jensen Huang, told me there was really nothing to worry about. ARM's business model was safe with him.
I love the business model, and we expect to offer more to the customers that ARM currently serves. The business we bought is a combination of the people, the incredible architecture, and the business model that led to this rich ecosystem that ARM represents today. That's what we bought, and we certainly, in our best interest, would not damage that. I don't actually know of one of our competitors who is a large customer of ARM's. ARM's customers are mobile devices, embedded systems. Those ARM's customers are not competitors of ours. The only reason why somebody would speculate we're competition is that we're semiconductor companies. On that virtue, almost every technology company competes with each other. We are a semiconductor company, no doubt. However, we address markets that most ARM customers don't.
Jensen Huang of NVIDIA. Well, let's get a neutral view on this from the California-based chip industry analyst Jeff Blaber of CCS Insight. He put the whole deal in context.
You can't understate how big this is for the semiconductor industry. ARM is basically the foundation upon which everyone is building. ARM shipped 22 billion chips last year, or they were the architecture that those chips were based on. A huge proportion of the industry, all the mobile phone industry, the burgeoning IoT opportunity, all of that is based on ARM. So this is huge for the industry. And ARM's success really has been built on the fact that it is independent.
Hermann Hauser, the co-founder, has been pushing this line that it is independent, it is the Switzerland of the industry, and this will destroy the business model. Is he right?
I think he makes a very fair point. The fact is that ARM's success, as I say, has been built on neutrality. The fact that ARM has been independent has meant that a whole swathe of licensees has been comfortable using ARM technology. The moment that goes to a competitor, that does risk being compromised.
Jensen Huang, the chief executive of NVIDIA, is insisting that he loves the business model and in fact he wants to enhance it and there is no threat to any of the licensees. Are they convinced by that?
I think the challenge here is NVIDIA knows how ARM works and it will have thought this through very carefully and will have the right intentions. The issue is that if you look back through history, any business that is competing against a licensing business that has two interests side by side, it very rarely works. because perception is reality. The moment those licensees start to see a long-term threat or opposition against their core business, they're going to start looking at alternatives. So I think the real risk here is those licensees start to consider other options and the value of ARM erodes over time.
This deal, though, might not happen. Isn't that the case? There's a lot of regulatory hurdles to clear.
That is most definitely the case. I think this could go on for some 12, 18 months, if not longer. There would inevitably be concessions that have to be made in order to secure regulatory clearance. And the biggest single question mark is China. Even in a quote-unquote normal environment, I think this would be questionable because the Chinese landscape is built upon ARM's technology and they have a vested interest in keeping the status quo. I think given the fact that we're in the middle of a trade war, if not political Cold War between the US and China, it's going to be fascinating to see how that plays out. But I'd be very surprised if the deal as it's been proposed would get through scrutiny from China and the regulator there.
Jeff Blaber of CCS Insight, and obviously a lot still to happen on that interesting story. Now, it's been a big week in gaming. On Wednesday, we had 2 major launches.
Each time I awake, this planet seems somehow different.
We want virtual reality to be something that anyone can just jump into, with the best and most immersive experiences out there, and we want it to be available to as many people as possible. And I'm excited to share with all of you Oculus Quest 2. Now, I've really been enjoying using mine during this lockdown, and I'm looking forward to getting these in more of your hands in just a few weeks.
Let's do this.
What you heard there was Sony trailing its new PlayStation PS5 and Facebook's Mark Zuckerberg getting excited about the latest Oculus Quest virtual reality headset, both available in the coming weeks. So, what have we learned about the latest trends in gaming? I've been talking to Keza MacDonald, games editor at The Guardian news site. We started with Sony and its long-running battle with Microsoft's Xbox.
I thought it was really interesting to see both Sony and Microsoft go for a two-pronged approach. We've got a slightly cheaper model and we've got a very, very expensive model. There's that acknowledgement that not everybody has a 4K TV, not everybody has a home cinema system, but probably everyone wants to play the newest games. So it also offers a more affordable way in for a lot of people.
And they're also gradually, or perhaps rapidly, moving us from a situation where you've got to buy physical games to gaming in the cloud.
Yeah, I think downloading your games has become completely normalised since the PlayStation 4 and the Xbox One came out. And now we have two systems, the cheaper ones, that don't have a disk drive at all. So it's designed for either streaming your games or for downloading them. Microsoft and Sony both have their own streaming services, PlayStation Now and Project X Cloud as it's called. Neither is quite ready for prime time yet, but over the course of the next few years, as people buy these new systems, I reckon both of those will become a standard way to play video games.
So does that mean that the hardware becomes ever less important? It's a kind of given, and it's all about who's got the best catalogue, who's got the keenest price for that service?
That's very true. I think the actual games and the price that they come out as are going to be more important than the console. I think this is maybe the last console generation as we know it. I don't want to say no one's ever going to buy a box again for games. You know, people like to buy stuff. People enjoy the concept of having a box. People are very attached to the concept of like a PlayStation or an Xbox. So it may not be the very last, but I think that what's more important than what technology lives inside the box now is what games you can play. I mean, millions, indeed billions of people play video games, and the majority of them play on a phone or play on a Nintendo Switch or play on an older console. Like, not everybody is an early adopter, and not everybody's going to have the mad TV at home that actually takes advantage of more and more advanced technology. I think we're going to hit a point where most people have what they need from the technology, and what's important is the different kinds of things you can play and how much it's going to cost.
And of course, the other big trend in gaming has been, over the last few years, the move to virtual reality, which, to my mind, has stuttered quite a lot lately. Did Facebook's Oculus event convince you that this time it's different?
Do you know what? I've never been convinced that VR and gaming are the perfect pair. When the first headsets came out in 2016, gaming was a testing ground for VR. It was a very good place to try out the tech. Lots of gamers are tech early adopters, right? So it was a very good place to see what the tech could do. But for me, the thing that's going to make VR a proper thing is when it's used for social stuff, when it's used like a smartphone, when it's used for things that we do in our everyday lives, when it's used for travel, not when it's used just for games. So I feel like the idea that VR is the future of video games has not come to pass. Like, VR is one option, but people don't necessarily want to play in VR. They don't want to sit with a huge headset on when they're, relaxing at the end of a day. It's not going to become a default option for games. So I can't say that the Oculus 2 announcement has changed that for me personally.
Really? Mark Zuckerberg was so excited and you sat there going, meh.
I really did. I have to say, the first time I ever put on a VR headset, I thought, oh my goodness, this is going to change the world, etc., etc. But the more times that you experience VR, the more acutely aware you become of its limitations. And one of those limitations is that you are completely shut off from the world around you. And that's actually, for a lot of people, not a particularly desirable or enjoyable sensation to be completely shut off that way. I think it's going to take a huge cultural shift, apart from anything else, for VR to become truly mainstream and not a novelty.
Keza MacDonald from The Guardian. Now, Jane Wakefield, what does your household tell us about the future of gaming? Is it virtual reality? Is it playing games in the cloud? You got some personal insights.
It's playing games in rooms that I'm not in is mainly what it is. I'm quite keen on virtual reality. I know you're a bit of a skeptic, but as you know, the editor of the Tech Desk is a big fan. He's talked to me about how he goes and relaxes on a beach at the end of the day, and that sounds to me amazing, and I want to do that.
Here's the thing. All these innovations that we've seen in gaming over recent years, or a lot of them, they don't appeal to hardcore gamers, but they do find a sort of wider public, don't they?
Yeah, I think that's it. That's the next move. They've got to get into mass market. They've got to appeal to people like me that just want to experiment with it. But as you've said to me before, the real issue is going to be whether the first time you use it, you think it's amazing. Second time you use it, you start thinking, not sure. But of course, if you've bought it by that stage, I suppose you're stuck with it, and then you just have to find uses for it.
That's right. Huge amounts of money invested in recent years by the games industry in virtual reality, but not much to show for it in terms of gamer interest. Possibly more interest in the educational area and training and so on. But I'm still slightly sceptical about whether VR is the next big thing. Well, we've run out of time for this week. Thanks to my BBC colleague Jane Wakefield. You can read all of her stories and mine. Get all the latest tech news at bbc.com/technology. And don't forget to join us again in the Tech Tent at the same time next week.
Have you ever felt like leaving everything behind and starting your life over again from scratch? Just go one evening and never come back.
The things he took were his backpack, clothes, mobile phone, wallet, his glasses, and what he was wearing on that day.
In Japan, this is possible, and not that uncommon. You make a phone call, and one of the so-called night-moving companies will help you disappear.
I picked up only my dog and some clothes and left with my car. And I realized this night-moving business is possible.
As part of a new series called Rule Breakers in the documentary podcast, I'll be introducing stories like this that challenge conventions.
Put simply, I got fed up with human relationships. I came here because nobody knows me.
So please join me, Shireen Nishat, on the documentary podcast from the BBC World Service.
Take care, I said, and I cried.
Just search for the documentary wherever you get your podcasts.